It's been a month of war against corruption in Nigeria. Operatives of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, yesterday arrested Nsima Ekere, a former managing director of the Niger Delta Development Commission, NDDC, for alleged diversion of funds to the tune of 47 billion naira through registered contractors of the agency. This was disclosed by the Commission spokesperson, Wilson Ewujare. The 56-year-old Nsima was the agency's managing director between 2016 and 2018 and was the All Progressive Congress APC governorship candidate for Akwa Ibom in the 2019 elections. His arrest is coming less than a few days after EFCC arrested Ahmed Idris, Accountant General of the Federation, over 80 billion fraud. Goodness me.
Here we go again.
Yes.
With predictable tedium.
Yes.
Another day, another government official being arrested for corruption.
Yes.
But I think it's really good that the EFCC is up and doing. It's excellent. However, like I said about our Accountant General story, the real proof of the pudding is in securing, actual convictions. It's not just about arrests and prosecution. It's the convictions. And it's interesting that you've just said that this allegation of this 47 billion naira fraud was that it was perpetrated through registered contractors. It's always instructive to note how these alleged crimes are committed. You'll recall the huge row, I'm sure it's unforgettable, the NDDC audits that were supposed to have had made public, which we're still waiting for. We would have seen through that what loopholes exist in the process that create these opportunities. But the fact that he's gone through registered contractors, is there a way around even that? Because you've had efforts, haven't you? Like universal payment systems, trying to streamline processes, trying to introduce technology to reduce these opportunities, but people will always find a way. I'm curious about the details. How exactly did he manage to use those registered contractors to perpetrate this alleged crime, and what can be done to close the loopholes? But I think this is really good for the EFCC, but the problem is always in making the charges stick.
Dr. Bulletin? Okay, well, the key difference here is that in the case of Nsima Ekere, we were told that he voluntarily honored the invitation of the EFCC. In his own case, he did not behave like the Accountant General, who we're now told has been suspended from office, and who was accused by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission of evading, arrest or evading invitations. So it's a good thing that Nsima Ekere, did not put himself in a similar situation. The second thing, of course, is that the Niger Delta Development Commission has been a very notorious, government agency. You recall all that probe by the House of Representatives and the fainting spells of a certain Professor Ponde and all the altercation between the House of Reps panel and also representatives of the NDDC. And also the drama that occurred about, a former acting managing director of the NDDC alleging that, a certain minister had tried to compromise her and that she refused. Now, with that drama at that time, but the question that was raised through all of that was that, look, there were revelations by civil society groups, by other groups, NGOs, indicating that, look, the NDDC is a cesspool of corruption, diversion of funds, mismanagement, inefficiency, all to a point that, we started raising the questions about the relevance of the Development Commission. A Niger Delta Development Commission that was supposed to serve the people, there was a place where contractors would take contracts and they will not do it, and nothing will happen because many of these contracts were given to ghost contractors. And Nigerians had called at the time that the government must get to the root of the matter and ensure that persons are sanctioned. It's not only Nsima Ekere, according to the reports that has been invited for questioning by the EFCC. The ICPC, we're told, has also invited some persons associated with the NDDC. So, to the extent that there has been no closure to the matter of the NDDC and its inefficiency, I think it's important that the EFCC is revisiting the matter And perhaps at the end of the day, we'll get better clarity on the issues of the audits and what exactly transpired in the NDDC. However, the only point that remains to be made is that nobody should come forward with that old argument that it's Niger Delta money and nobody should harass Niger Delta indigents. No, this is not about ethnicity. It's about transparency and accountability and getting to the root of what happened at the NDDC so that perhaps we can learn relevant lessons from it. And where there are persons who are found culpable, then of course the force of the law can take effect. Finally, I think it's important that we don't engage in media trial. As I always try to point out, Mr. Ekere, Nsima, should be given the opportunity, due opportunity, to defend himself. He should have access to fair hearing, as is constitutionally guaranteed, and nobody should jump to any conclusions yet. Whether it is Ahmed Idris or it is Nsima Ekere, I think, fairness is important.
I mean, it goes without saying, the EFCC, the NDDC is a cesspit of corruption. We can't deceive ourselves. But we're also big hypocrites in Nigeria. We deceive ourselves so much. Why? We all saw on TV, Kolawole Johnson, the man that investigated the NDDC, brought out a report, bank transactions and dossier. Why didn't the authorities take Kolawole Johnson's report and implement it then? So it's when it suits us, we do things. And you were talking about the contract scam. If you're reading Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala books, Reforming the Unreformable, there's something called the contract scam out there. In fact, this is just the first phase of the contract scam, where people use bogus contracts, they inflate the cost, so the rebate on the contract cost comes to them. There's also something called the judgment debts, where they deliberately make government default on the payment of a contract, and then they take government to court. Government officials will connive with companies, take government to court, and they will pay the judgment debt. There are many different schemes they use. But it just shows that we're asking for a forensic report. We're talking about the fact that the NDC didn't have a board. There goes your answer for all this while. And you see, it's not only Nsima Ekere. I think it was 2 days ago or yesterday night, Olubunmi Patricia Ete, the former Speaker of the House, was picked up too by the EFCC relating to NDDC contracts. So the question is, in 2 days, we've got 2 people picked up as regards NDDC contracts. Who is going to be picked up next? I think the EFCC has not started yet. When they are ready, when they go through all the NDDC contracts, they will see how billions were squandered in this country. And they still have a lot of more people to pick. So let's be realistic with ourselves. We're just starting. That's all on news headlines. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll have Rotus, we have Michael, we have Aaron to give us updates on Africa, global business, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. Most Asia Pacifics, unfortunately, took their lead from the huge fall on Wall Street in their time overnight. Hong Kong leading them down hugely. Other Chinese tech stocks like Alibaba and Meituan actually in Hong Kong fell too. Mainland stocks in China went down as well. Goldman Sachs has revised its forecast for China now as a result of the COVID controls, growth down to 4%. This follows closely on from Citi yesterday, saying that they've cut their GDP from forecast for China down from 4.2 from 5.1, so quite a considerable fall in both those. So there are only basically now 2 major Asia Pacific markets which are in positive territory as far as we are now into 2022. They're in, but they're both in Southeast Asia, Singapore and Indonesia. Actually, composite, both those up about 3% on the year. So it's only those 2 markets that are really standing out from that. Now, as inflation slows, but the ruble actually increases. Russia is hoping to avoid a financial crisis. Inflation, yes, running hot. And as you know, the central bank governor raised interest rates to 20% in the country. However, the ruble is now the best performing currency in the world. Now, it has to be said that, yes, indeed it is, but there are fears that because the way they did that was to have capital controls, and you could also only have a certain amount of foreign currency in accounts and so on. So it's become what experts in the monetary market call a managed currency. So does it actually reflect what's actually happening in Russia at the moment? I was with some energy analysts yesterday, and when I asked them about the eventual, it's too early to tell right now, but the eventual cut in the Russian economy in terms of sanctions at the moment, including gas and oil, if that were to take place through the EU, there's a lot of ifs and goods about all this, but you could be talking between 10 and 20% reduction in GDP in Russia, which is actually a huge amount, and that really would hurt Russia. The Ukraine invasion, now this is according to the UN. They're talking about a global food crisis. The Secretary General there said that the war had worsened food insecurity, particularly and sadly, of course, in poorer nations. We have noted this kind of thing before. The conflict has cut off supplies from Ukraine's ports as well. I can tell you that biomedical companies are rapidly trying to work out how to replace nitrogen-based fertilizer, which they're not getting at the moment, with bacteria to make it work, but that's going to take a long time. So as far as the United States is concerned, then the Dow dropped over 1,000 points yesterday. And this is basically because not just inflation worries, but how retail's suffering as well. There were two big ones yesterday that said that retail was not as good. And to add to that, as far as tech stocks are concerned, Cisco's valuation, which came after the market closed, they slashed their Q4 revenue outlook to -1%, from -1% to -5.5%. So tech stocks not doing very well there. The EU, let's turn our attention to them, is saying that because of various shortages, it'll start to burn more coal. It will, says Brussels, it's had permission, that the countries have had permission from Brussels to do this. They will be meeting their targets in 2030, their carbon targets and so on, but they will be using 5% more coal to replace what's gone on. Now, I make no apologies for repeating the inflation figures that we got on the programme yesterday in the UK, because the repercussions have been actually quite huge. Obviously, more calls from business now for business-friendly tax cuts, more calls for cuts in VAT, more calls for a windfall tax. The Chancellor stood in front of business leaders last night at a big dinner in the city and said that, you know, he is considering things, but everybody's saying now it's going to be too late when that happens. You need to do something right now. And regardless of the Bank of England saying that it's not their fault and these are circumstances beyond their control. But for the first time, you're getting this kind of this desperate situation in this country. Who would have thought that more people employed, more vacancies than there are people employed would be bad? Well, it could be bad for inflation. The cost of living, calls for benefit and pension increases. Now, these come in April next year. Now, people are saying this is too late. You should be doing this kind of thing now. So all sorts of calls, basically, to try to join up the dots in this awful cost of living crisis. And the UK is not alone in this. It's happening around the world. I'm just telling you what's happening now. We have the highest rate of inflation in the UK in the G7 countries right now. That's the global view.
All right, Michael, real quickly, I'd like to talk about PMQs yesterday. And it just shows that Boris Johnson's got no solution. He just keeps wobbling along. And I think Ian Blackford, who I like to call the soul of the House, puts it very aptly yesterday by saying his Aesop fables of trying to fight cost of living crisis, because he had practically no solution. And one other thing is, if the MD CEO of BP says there are no qualms with paying, taxes as regards the windfall they had, then why is he trying to block it and protect the business leaders? Because what he's invariably doing now is protecting the business leaders against the British people. So it's a country for the rich against the poor.
And if I may piggyback on that, I thought it was a strange position for a conservative government to take, But it's really not, is it? Because even Margaret Thatcher had windfall taxes on banks back in the day in the 80s and on North Sea oil and gas. Obviously, New Labour did, but, you expect that from Labour. But, why is Boris Johnson seeming to want to die on this particular hill? Because as Rufai said, even BP don't seem to mind.
I think that his being forced into a position of saying, this is unconservative. You're absolutely right about Margaret Thatcher and the privatisation taxes and so on, because a lot of those privatisations overvalued the companies that were being privatised. It often happens, and certainly there was a windfall tax then. I think what's happening, what I sense from people I talk to is that gradually, the government can't be seen to be making a rapid U-turn straight away, because that's not what politics is about. Politics is about gradually recognizing a flow, and they start getting very worried about their own survival. And I think that we will see a windfall tax on energy companies. What BP and Shell are now saying is, of course, that because of the rise in prices, they have been paying more in taxes. But you're only talking about £6 billion, which actually is a couple of pence off or on income tax, depending on which way you look at it. So these sums are not massive. I think there probably will be. I think that the Chancellor will be forced to do something before the autumn. It'll be too late in the autumn. I think that what people are saying this morning on the news here and the news outlets here is a possible cut in VAT of 2.5%. Income tax probably not cut until going to election, but some kind of also targeted energy relief and maybe targeted benefits as well. So they are going to be forced into a position to do something. Make no mistake about that. And as far as ideology is concerned, well, if it's about the voters and it's about political survival, that's what they'll do.
Well, on the windfall tax, the Times of London front page story reporting this morning that cabinet ministers are saying that it is ideologically unconservative to go the direction of the windfall tax. And then at the other hand, you have Treasury officials saying that this is politically unavoidable and that the windfall tax will have to come. So I think there's just that disagreement at the center of all of it. But I wanted to talk about the meeting with the business leaders by the Chancellor yesterday. The business leaders are saying that, look, government needs to move quickly and not wait till the budget in autumn. And then again, it looks like the Chancellor is sending out mixed messages. He says there will be relief with energy, there will be relief with regard to food costs, but he's really not saying anything concrete, because his last conclusion at that CBI meeting was to tell the business leaders that there is no measure that we will adopt, there's no step that we could take that could fight off these global forces, which is a consistent thing that many leaders have been hiding under, namely that the crisis is what is happening in Ukraine, okay? Although one political leader yesterday was talking about Iraq invasion, but that's just by the way. Now to the UN, talking about global food crisis and the accompanying effect of malnutrition, famine, hunger, and all of that. The UN Secretary General went ahead to talk about a few measures that could be adopted. He's talking about the goodwill of the leading countries of the world, and he says he's been talking to the affected parties. He's also talking about renegotiating and reintegrating the breadbasket of the world, Ukraine, and also Russia, the gas station of the world. How does he intend to do that? Would diplomacy help in any regard to stave off the looming crisis that, as you pointed out, has affected everything else, with the prospect of a global recession becoming real by the day?
Well, I think we've covered the UK political side of things, I think, that as well as meeting with the CBI and so on. The CBI is what we call a sort of bosses organisation. It's larger businesses. Some of those are multinational businesses as well. So I think when they start to, I mean, the relationship between government and the CBI has always been a fairly rocky one, right since the days of, I think, the best leader of the CBI was Digby Jones, actually, who you probably know of. And he recognised that it's the members and the government that the CBI should be looking towards. The mixed message, yes, there are. That's politics for you. As far as the UN's concerned, I think diplomacy might work, but diplomacy only works when there is a big hammer behind it, when there's some big leverage behind it. I don't see where that is right now. I think that the UN, the only sensible, the UN should have been listening to our program, shouldn't they? Should be watching our program, because we've been talking about this for weeks now. For the UN to recognize that and bring their so-called power into it, who knows what they're going to do. The only thing that I thought was sensible from what they were saying, which is relatively new, was this idea of having food corridors through which countries which wish to export wheat, and certainly Ukraine does, and certainly Russia does as well, because there's no point in having it if you're not exporting it. If that were to work, that might be a way forward. How that would be administrated, which countries would come first, I'm not quite sure who would do that. So it's a good thought from the UN, but like most things from the UN, it's a thought. The practicalities of it are a long way off.
Right, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Our dependable Rosa Sadiri is here to give us an African business update. Good morning, Rosa.
Yes, good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Rufai.
I see
good
you
morning.
Brought a friend.
Yes. We, the Global Business Reports on Arise TV, won the Startup South Best Startup Technology Show of 2021. Now, this was last year. It was 2021. The plaque was imported from China, so it took a while to get here, and that's why it's just getting here now. So, congrats to the entire team on the Global Business Report. All right,
congratulations.
Thank you. We love tech.
Congratulations.
We're going to have Rufai on the show. So thank you.
You had to rub that in.
Yeah, you know.
And it was brought in from China.
We need to manufacture our own plaques here.
Lotus, why don't you post with it?
Yes. There you go. Good photo. Thank you. It's on Yes, thanks to the team. Thanks to everybody on Arise TV. Another one for the station. Oil and gas. The federal government has withheld consent to Seplat's acquisition of Mobile Oil Producing Nigeria Unlimited's acquisition. The acquisition of Seplat's acquisition of MPNU's assets. Now, the reason if you remember back in February, Seplat said that these assets were to the tune of about $1.2 billion or so. And February they announced the acquisition, that they had intended to, they had reached an agreement. And this was an equity transfer of ownership, right, of those assets. So we have to emphasize that. Now, in March, the NNPC, state oil company of the country, expressed its, has a right of first refusal, right, in order to express its own interest in those particular assets. There was supposed to be a meeting that took place after that, and so on and so forth. Well, now the government, through the CEO of the NUPRC, Upstream Regulatory Commission, Benga Komalafe, wrote two letters. He wrote a letter to Seplat and wrote a letter to ExxonMobil, saying that, hey, listen. First of all, actually, let me go back to the letter that MPNU wrote to the government. MPNU wrote to the government and said that as far as this transaction is concerned, it has no bearing on the joint operating agreement from 1990 between the NNPC and Mobil with regards to these assets, because it's between Seplat Offshore and the shareholders of MPNU. So the government then wrote back those two letters to MPNU and to Seplat saying, hey, listen, first of all, I think it's section 3.1 of the guidelines seeking ministerial consent for this transaction. National interest supersedes your excuse that these parties are not privy to the joint operating agreement from 1990. National interest supersedes that. Secondly, Seplat wrote to the regulator seeking approval. And what the Benga Komalafe of the NUPRC said in his letter was that, look, as far as procedures is concerned, the leaseholder of these assets is MPNU, is Mobil, and so the channel of communication is supposed to go through Mobil. And essentially, we weren't carried along for the entirety of this transaction. The deal is not dead. I'm going to be looking at Seplat stock because hopefully it doesn't fall on this news. Essentially, they just have to redo it. Essentially, they have to go through MPNU as the assignor of the assets, as the leaseholder, and hopefully it's approved. From there to our discussion from yesterday. Well, the motorcycle issues in Lagos. Remember, there's not been an official ban. The state government through Babajide Sanwo-Olu has banned Okadas in, I think, 6 areas. I've just put up the details here. Essentially, this is the second time a ban is taking place. The first one was February the 1st of 2020. This latest ban now is June the 1st. Is when it takes effect. It affects Ikeja, Surulere, Etiosa, Lagos Mainland, Lagos Island, and Apapa. And Governor Sanwo-Olu said it is indefinite and it's forever. To which there was a burst of applause when he announced this. Now, look, something has to be said. When it comes to, there was I think, what did they call them? There's an association in Lekki Phase 1. Didn't you share the press release? The Lekki Phase 1 Association?
The Lekki Phase 1 Association.
They held a press release apparently yesterday on the menace to the state from Okadas. Let me read the governor's statement. He said, "This is a phase ban where I'm backing on this period, and the key thing here, we expect that within the short while when this ban will be enforced, that is between yesterday, May the 18th, and June 1st, when it will be enforced, Okada riders in other places where the activities are yet to be banned can find something else to do." Oh, I guess the Lagos State's labor market is just so fluid that they can drop what they're doing and find something else to do. Lagos State's unemployment rate is 37%. Underemployment is the lowest in the country, 4%. So 41% of the labor force in Lagos is either underemployed or unemployed. That's 4 out of every 10. Now, to the question of, because this association and a number of other folks keep saying Lagos is being invaded, Lagos is under siege, why are there so many Okadas here? There's a reason for that. If we take a look at the fares, we shared this yesterday, but just one more time. If you look at the fares this is from the Bureau of Statistics, it is the lowest and the cheapest of the 4 categories of transportation, from waterways to buses, intracity, intercity, and airfare. Now, this question as to why are there so many, this is the key here. Every time the Bureau of Statistics releases their numbers, they break it down by state. Let's take a look at this second data point here. Lagos has the highest average price for motorcycles across the entire country, followed by Kwara and Yobe. The lowest 3 are Anambra, Kebbi, and Jigawa. This is economics 101. Migration. Economic migration is movement from one region to another in order to seek a better standard of living. And is it any surprise that anybody from another region, or I don't know, Chad, Niger, wherever, will want to move to the commercial capital in order to take advantage of the highest fares of a particular service?
Well, they cannot. They're not Nigerian.
Well, no, I'm not saying Chad.
That right.
Okay, so
you said Chad or Nigeria.
What
build
I'm saying
that
is,
wall, Brutus.
You see, build that wall.
But they cannot come here.
They can't come
Only
here.
Nigerians can come to Lagos.
And I'm not saying that all the Okada riders are obviously from Chad or Niger. What I'm saying is that other regions include the regions within Nigeria. So,
well, yeah, that's fine.
And here's another thing. Although, since you brought it up, that is reminiscent of language from Nigel Farage, right, of UKIP. It's reminiscent of language from Le Pen in France. Reminiscent of Trump in 2015-16 when he said Mexicans are coming across the border to rape women.
Nationalist. But everybody's not.
Yeah,
So look,
I don't like to borrow from the right-wing lexicon, but needs must, Rotus. We know what we're facing here, Rotus. Don't be politically correct when you know. Don't act brand new.
No, I'm very hard. Your point is very
So, Rotus, this is my point.
Yeah.
I get your point. There's an economic, push in Lagos.
Yes.
But those also forget, in being holistic with your data, a lot of people will come to Lagos, yes, because of the high Okada rates, but don't forget cost of living in Lagos.
They
is
share
higher,
cost of living.
All right.
So they band together and they share a room.
No.
The cost of living is shared.
And it's shares, but it's still higher.
It's higher, yeah, that's fair. That's
you
fair.
can't compare a plate of food in Lagos
to another place. You're right, cool.
And all of that. The second point is, the problem is socioeconomic. And the problem is, I'm sorry, you're not getting the point, Rotus.
Okay.
I understand the economic part. I understand the Lagos state government has not done what it ought to do as regards transportation and providing alternatives. Transportation is supposed to be cheap. I understand that we're 40 years behind because this metro they're just doing ought to be done 40 years ago. I understand all of that. But Rotus, you cannot absorb the fact that it has increased crime and criminality. We're talking about Lekki. See what happened in Abuja. See the destruction of life and property caused by the same Okada people at the market in Abuja yesterday. So it is things like this that embolden people. I think what you should advocate a way forward in the first place is if you still want them to stay, because enforcement will be a big problem. We've banned them too much that people are already saying we've even become Barnabas.
Somebody said
because we banned them in February.
They say it's a reban. They say you're rebanning them. Yeah, you're rebanning them.
But the truth is, the Okada riders too and the associations are not doing what they ought to do. As we speak today, I can bet you that Akomoro, Okada, so it doesn't have a data bank of all the Okada riders.
That's fair. I can accept that.
Because if they had the data bank of all the Okada riders, the perpetrators of this crime ought to have been picked out. What is the barrier to entry for the business? It's almost non-existent.
Well, the cost of the bike.
Every Tom, Dick, and Harry can come into Lagos and do this. And you know what? They bring in a lot of crimes. And when they bring a lot of crime, and it goes back to even what I was talking about yesterday, you know, because in trying to argue the point, you talked about the broken glass theory and all of that, and I looked and I laughed. The truth has to be said. This is socioeconomic. Crimes will come. Businesses will be hampered. Lekki is no longer safe. Do you know people and businesses are moving out of Lekki? Do you know?
I wouldn't attribute it all to them, entirely to them.
There's because of them.
I wouldn't. Anyway, so
we are residents of these areas. So we see what is
them.
happening. These guys have considered a nuisance. If we come back and do a structure, a proper structure that worked at regulation, I've got no problems with that because I'm capitalist. But as we speak today, Rutus, the level of madness is unbearable. Just wait till you hit an Okada man on the road.
My car's been scratched. Yeah, I've been through that. I've been through that.
They harass you.
I've been through it.
Before you see what we're talking about. So it's almost not sustainable, Rutus.
Okay. Let me start with the Okada issue.
Yep.
Definitely, it will appear that the state government in Lagos is responding to the killing of Sunday Daniel Imo, the sound engineer in Lekki, by these Okada riders. After that, a task force was sent out to go and arrest those Okada riders and seize their motorcycles. Over 120 motorcycles were seized by the task force. And now the governor has come out to say, we're banning these motorcycles in 6 local governments, including Etiosa, Apapa, and these axes of the city. Now, another lady, a concerned individual, one Ms. Ronke Onodeko, went online to put up a petition as of 5 o'clock yesterday. Over 1,510 persons have signed that petition asking the state government to ban these motorcyclists. So maybe the government was responding to all of this. Now, what has the government done? Government says it will take effect from June 1, and that further steps will be taken. But there has been a pushback from the Hausa community in Lagos State, led by the Seriki of Obalende, who has petitioned the governor to say that, look, you cannot do without Okada in Lagos.
Facts, 100% facts.
And it has the support of the Seriki Hausa Shasha, the Seriki Hausa Agege, Seriki Hausa Obalende, and together, their concern is that, look, the Hausa community in Lagos, most of them use these motorcycles to trade, and it would be wrong to economically strangulate the Hausa community in Lagos. And he was reminded, the governor was reminded by everybody, by all this Seriki Hausa, that you should realize that the Hausa community has very big chunk of the votes. And this was the point of the Seriki Hausa from Alimosho,
which is a
Alimosho
big
local government. It's a big political constituency.
Huge.
So Rufa has talked about the economics of it, but the political dimension of it has come up. So what will the governor of Lagos State do? Because they told him that it's not wise to ban motorcycles before the election. The second thing is that Akomoro, the Association of Commercial Motorcycle Riders and Owners of Nigeria, they say that they are not affected. They operate in 8 local government areas, and in the 8 local government areas where they operate, there is no problem because they are registered, they are licensed. And the leader of Akomoro, or the spokesperson, said it is these Hausa motorcyclists who don't agree to be registered. or they don't even have any license.
You see the problem now?
So there's also an ethnic dimension to it now.
Which is unfair.
Now the fear is that
problem?
if you ban in 6 local governments and the major persons affected are the Hausa motorcyclists, the spokesperson for our Commonwealth was asked the question, okay, if those people decide to leave Etiosa, leave Obalende, leave...
and come to your...
and they come to your area.
Exactly.
He said, no, they will not be allowed because they are not registered and they know their members. So it's also a way of stoking up tension. And that was why the chairman of the Lekki Residents Association yesterday put out a notice reminding Lekki residents that he understands or he has information that, you know, some motorcyclists of northern extraction may be planning to attack. So the governor has to look at, or rather the state government, has to look at all of these dimensions.
Well, why don't they just get registered? Why do you think you're above the law?
Well,
why?
they can,
I think, Doctor, you're right. Doctor, you're right.
It's deeper than economic matter.
Hold on one second.
It's political.
What is this refusal to be registered?
So that's what we are saying.
Hang on.
You see, you keep missing the point.
We should be careful. I want to be very careful as to not, you know, blanket one particular. Doctor, you said yesterday that once in a while you've used an Okada, right? I've used them. It is not everyone that is of Hausa extraction.
Of course not.
So that just needs to be put out there.
Yeah,
just,
but that much is clear. Many of them are not even from Nigeria. Do you remember Mean Girls? Yes,
No,
you don't even go here. You don't even go here. You don't go here. You're from Chad.
But Rotus, hope you're saying that it's not a matter of data.
It is a matter of data. That's why
you keep missing the point.
now.
It's not a matter of data.
All right.
It is a matter of politics, geopolitical sensitivity. It is deeper than what you think it is on the surface.
Although I would have loved to comment on Seplat.
Yes,
you know, and ExxonMobil.
No problem, that's understood.
ExxonMobil divesting 40%. You know, but the Nigerian government should be careful. You're talking about national interest. NNPC wants to grab everything.
And
I hope that does not happen in this case.
Right.
NNPC is exercising its preemptive rights under the joint joint operating agreement.
Yeah.
The MNUP that you refer to, Mobile Nigeria
Oil Producing Unlimited.
Yeah. Are they not the owners of... they are owned by ExxonMobil.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it's not right to say, oh, they were not part of the agreement because Seplat addressed this before now. NNPC cannot handle those assets. They have technical access, but they are financially insolvent.
And Seplat is an indigenous Nigerian firm.
And it's important to encourage these indigenous investors instead of this bogus thing called national interest. Seplat can look for money and do it, even if those assets they are already old anyway.
Exactly.
And that's probably the main reason why ExxonMobil and all these companies they are divesting. Yeah. But they will tell you it's community crisis that they are running away from. That is not very true.
They've milked it.
Well, people never want to address the real issues now, do they? Thank you, Rotus.
Thank you, too.